Namaste and a very warm welcome, good evening, good morning, and good day to all our friends here. We are gathered here collectively today to commemorate and celebrate the 150th birth anniversary of Sri Aurobindo. A few centers and scholars got together last year to initiate the formation of the Sri Aurobindo Integral Education Network, SCION, to share our work and aspiration on a common platform. We begin this program by paying our homage to Sri Aurobindo, followed by a meditation to invoke the presence of the Lord and bring into manifestation His reign of truth.
To Thee, who hast been the material envelope of our Master, to Thee our infinite gratitude. Before Thee, who hast done so much for us, who hast worked, struggled, suffered, hoped, endured so much. Before Thee, who hast willed all, attempted all, prepared, achieved all for us. Before Thee, we bow down and implore that we may never forget, even for a moment, all we owe to Thee.
Sri Aurobindo is actively present amongst us. His force and presence can be felt behind world events, and one feels him leading India to her destined role. The mother had said that he has not departed, and in fact is even more actively working behind the veil in the subtle physical realm. We now begin with our first eminent speaker, Dr. Karan Singh, who needs no introduction, and he will speak on the general theme, the impact of Sri Aurobindo's ideas and force in the 21st century on India and the world. Dr. Karan Singh will highlight the ideas from the 5 dreams.
Dear friends around the world, we are now celebrating the 75th anniversary of India's freedom and the 150th anniversary of Sri Aurobindo's birth. It's an extraordinary synchronicity because Sri Aurobindo all his life was fighting for India's freedom, first in the battlefields of Bengal and then in the chambers of his own consciousness and mind. Now, he's written such a great deal that one cannot even mention it. His collected works come into 30 volumes. But what did happen was that on the 15th of August 1947, which was his 75th birthday, he made a declaration, if you like, or statement, in which he spoke about his 5 dreams on this occasion. And I'll rather rapidly go through those 5 dreams to see how far they've actually come into our consciousness. The first dream, of course, was the unity of India. He was very upset at the partition and felt that it was very dangerous and that if the partition remains, we would be vulnerable. A new invasion was also possible, which incidentally did take place in 1962. And India would not reach its full glory unless it was united. Now, as far as that is concerned, the only possibility I can think of is SARC, because a political unification of the country, I'm afraid, is out of the question. But SARC was envisaged on the lines of the European Union as a forum where the areas that originally belonged to the whole greater India, as it were, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, and so on, they could all come together. Unfortunately, SARC has not taken off yet. But hopefully one day in the future it will. And that is the only way his first dream could possibly be fulfilled. His second dream was of the resurgence and liberation of the peoples of Asia. Let's recall that when he was writing, a lot of colonial powers were still in command of vast areas of Asia, whether it was the Dutch or the Portuguese or the British or the French. Now, this has certainly been fulfilled. I think we've seen in our own lifetimes the liberation of the whole of Asia. I don't think today we can say there's any part of Asia at all that is under foreign domination. So the second dream has come true. The third dream was a dream of a world union forming the basis of a fairer, brighter and nobler life for all mankind. Now, this is very interesting because this idea has been in the air for a long time. The League of Nations was set up in 1918, I think, with this idea. Then the United Nations was set up in 1945. The idea of a world union is something I think that is now widely accepted as an idealistic possibility. On the ground, I'm afraid, if anything, we are moving in the opposite direction because nationalisms are again becoming more pronounced and they are in fact against globalization. The former president of the United States, in fact, actually said, I don't like the word globalization. So there are anti-global forces also working. But I think that ultimately this whole idea of the world as a family, of our ancient concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, will prevail at some time or the other. It doesn't seem to be doing so at present. Then the fourth dream was again something which has been fulfilled. Another dream, the spiritual gift of India to the world, has already begun. Now that has already begun in a big way. In fact, it was spearheaded by Swami Vivekananda. The first Parliament of World Religions in Chicago took place, and 1895 years. And he made a tremendous impact. And from there, there's been a whole host of people. There's been the Ramakrishna Mission, there's been the Chinmoy Mission, there's been the Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, ISKCON people. There've been a lot of different sects and different gurus who've taken India's. There's been that self-realization fellowship in Los Angeles, doing very good work. And there's the Aurobindo Society, of course, which has branches in a lot of places in America, and a lot of followers of Sri Aurobindo, whom I'm sure are looking into following this address. They are also doing this in a big way, the whole India's wisdom, and that includes, mind you, yoga in the broader sense of the term. Even the actual sense of the yogic exercises, even that has now become, there's an International Day of Yoga, thanks to our Prime Minister, and the other deeper aspects of yoga. So here I think his dream has been fulfilled, the fourth dream. The fifth and final dream was a step in evolution which would raise man to a higher and larger consciousness and begin the solution of the problems which have perplexed and vexed him since he began to think and to dream of individual perfection and a perfect society. Now this, he says himself, is still a personal dream of his personal idea. His whole concept of the evolution of consciousness is something that is very interesting. People are beginning to study consciousness closely. What is the relationship between the mind and the body? What is the relationship between the ideas of the higher consciousness and of the new physics that's opening up extraordinary vistas for us? So there again, mind you, it's just as he said at the beginning, he says very clearly that this is still a personal hope and an ideal which has begun to take hold both in India and in the West on forward-looking minds. So there we rest the case. Some of his dreams have been fulfilled. Some are perhaps on the way to be fulfilled. Some do not seem to be likely to be fulfilled. So I think on this occasion of the 150th anniversary of Sri Aurobindo, we pay our homage to him and hope and pray for their blessings and for the welfare of the world, which today is going through a very difficult crisis. Such a pleasure talking to all of you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Dr. Karan Singh. He is online present with us. In fact, all the speakers are here, but for the sake of clarity and presentation, we have recorded them also. We have next Dr. Ananda Reddy speaking on the prophetic words of the Mother.
Long back, in 1972, the mother had declared that in 50 years the whole world, all the receptive sections of humanity will be absorbed in the power of Sri Aurobindo's thought. Similarly, even before, in 1905, Sri Aurobindo had written a letter to his wife in which he wrote, "I have the strength to deliver the fallen race. It is not physical strength, but the strength of knowledge." So it is always seen that it is Sri Aurobindo's knowledge, the power of his knowledge, the power of his thought, that will conquer the human mental consciousness. In fact, we can understand that his knowledge, his power of thought, has two sections to it, the temporal and the eternal. It is his temporal knowledge that helped gain the freedom of the country. In fact, when he leaped into the freedom movement of the country, he had an agenda on three levels. One was to have an armed insurgents. Second, to convert the whole nation to the ideal of independence. And third, a non-cooperation and passive resistance. All these is summarized in one famous mantra, Purna Swaraj for India. Of course, he had the practical program of Swadeshi boycott and also how to have a national education. So it is on these levels that India gained a new spirit, a new hope, a new ideal. The ideal was that India should gain freedom not only for herself, but for the sake of the world. So this is how India gained its freedom, standing on Sri Aurobindo's great ideal and strength. Now coming to the eternal, it is after 1950 or so that the new consciousness of Superman came down. And Sri Aurobindo in his eternal ideals had given us the ideal of the evolution of human consciousness beyond the human species. And that is where we see that Sri Aurobindo is working and the mother is working along with Sri Aurobindo to bring down the new consciousness and take humanity to a greater freedom. So the first level, it was the freedom of the country. On the eternal level, it is freedom of humanity from ignorance. Sri Aurobindo had in this way inaugurated the third stage of human evolution. The first two being God, light, freedom, immortality, and bliss, as he writes in the Life Divine. Freedom, of course, people have sought in before also, but that was more an individual freedom or a nation's freedom. But here is Sri Aurobindo who is talking about the freedom of humanity. So this is what I understand by the message of the mother, and I'm sure in the times to come, human mind will be completely convinced of this message of Sri Aurobindo and the mother.
Thank you, Anand Bhai, for that. We move on to Shri Ranjan Mitter, who will also speak on ideas of Sri Aurobindo that have impacted India and the world. This will be followed by Christine Devin, who will speak on the third dream, which is the idea of the human unity and global union, and then, of course, Devdip Ganguli. So we start with Shri Ranjan Mitter ji.
Bonjour, as they say in Sri Aurobindo Ashram Panditsari. I would like to examine with you the relevance of Sri Aurobindo's 150th birth anniversary. Why are we celebrating him? Just because he was a patriot or a philosopher of some repute? Just because he influenced a large number of people? Just because in his name an ashram exists and a city of the future called Auroville? just because a statue of his stands in front of UNESCO building in Paris, just because our government and certain governments of the world have decided to celebrate him. I think these are all good answers, but this is not a good enough answer. We need to see whether Sri Aurobindo is relevant to us, because each one of us finally asks the question, what is in it for me? So I think we have to probe the answer from there. In this short intervention, I can only give certain pointers, and if that interests you, you need to probe further. To start with, I'd like to say that the mother, Mira Alfasa, who was Sri Aurobindo's spiritual collaborator, suggested that Sri Aurobindo is the avatar of the future and a forerunner of what the world could very well become. She goes on to add that Sri Aurobindo has not only given a picture of the future, more importantly, he has given us the assurance of the realization of that picture. If we read Sri Aurobindo, if we study Sri Aurobindo, if we look at his life, Sri Aurobindo breathes meaning into birth, individual and collective life, cultural and civilizational identity, social systems and political structures. All of these matter to us as human beings. Sri Aurobindo's approach is neither doctrinaire nor dogmatic, nor is there an oversimplification of truth. Rather, complexity and diversity of expression are given full possibility and amplification. With Sri Aurobindo, the beginning can be reason. You can be an extremely rational person and Sri Aurobindo would have an answer to all your queries. But that's neither a prerequisite nor a passport. Yet, for the incredulous, a rationale impossible to ignore is provided everywhere in his writings. Finally, many young people are resorting in various ways and capacities to entrepreneurship, social and organizational leadership, in business enterprises, NGOs, and varied civil society organizations. Much work and research has gone into the fields of ethics and values in management, as also leadership, and there are significant publications as well in this field of endeavor. Sri Aurobindo has been quoted extensively to give route and strategic direction to the running of organizations, social enterprises, business enterprises, and the nation, society, and humanity as a whole. In short, Sri Aurobindo is the goal, and Sri Aurobindo provides the compass to reach the goal. Thank you very much.
Namaste. In his Independence Day message, in his third dream about world union, Sri Aurobindo says that unification of the human world is underway. It must inevitably increase and conquer. But he adds, there must grow up an international spirit and outlook. International forms and institutions must appear. I would like to suggest here that this movement started around Sri Aurobindo's lifetime has increased, expanded greatly since Sri Aurobindo made that declaration. A movement, almost invisible, has pushed states and societies to come closer, to negotiate more frequently, and to define objectives of common interest. The increase of these exchanges of all sorts transformed the nature of national interest. It doesn't mean that national interest did not exist anymore, but even those who engage in the process to defend those interests, they could not decide on their own about the result of the negotiation. They had to settle in a situation of cooperation. Participants could not attain their goal without taking into account the goals of others. Of course, the First World War seemed to undo that movement, but the generalized character of that war showed also a certain unification of the world, the number of belligerents, the spread of military operations, and then after the war, the pandemic, and then the reconstruction. All that became more and more obvious that the world was constituted of many interlinked parts. The creation of the League of the Nations in 1919, the World of the Nation was the first worldwide intergovernmental organization. With the League of the Nations, collective negotiation became the norm. And whatever its failures, it was a huge turning point in the history of international relations. Now peace became an objective in itself. Of course, the cooperation again broke down with the Second World War, and then the UN was created. The inclusion of new states accelerated. It is a sign of something which no international organization had realized till then, the unification of different states around a fundamental charter. The UN is more often quoted for what it cannot do than for what it succeeds in doing. Nevertheless, it is at this stage the most advanced attempt at international cooperation. It reflects what member states are ready to do, what they are ready to share together. That is to say much more than 1 century ago. The domain of international cooperation has expanded in a considerable way. At the beginning of the 20th century, there were about 30 international organizations. Today, there are about 300. To this dense network of international organizations, we have to add the network of international non-governmental organizations. And that number has increased in a spectacular way. There were about 300, 400 in 46, and they are now probably around 10,000. Since the year 2000, businesses have also discovered that international cooperation could be profitable to them. Then there was the development of a new type of action with public-private partnerships on topics like health, environment, or microcredit. Of course, in view of the diversity of the interests represented there, it's not surprising that the result of those partnerships are very often object of controversies. Nevertheless, numbers have a virtue also. The more the stakeholders in the circle of international cooperation, the more the search for a common denominator is strengthened. It is a whole web of stakeholders and systems that tend to create a single world. a vast system of relations between multiple stakeholders, amongst which no one is solely in control, but who all contribute in defining the direction. International cooperation is the slow process of unification. The evolution of this process is one of the greatest transformations in contemporary international relations. Many people are very doubtful about their usefulness because the media throws only a skeptic glance at things that bring people closer. It is much more preoccupied with what divides. But yes, as Sri Aurobindo says, unification of the world is underway, and increasingly so, international forms and institutions have appeared, are appearing, and will be appearing more and more so. Thank you.
And finally, we have Devdip Ganguli. In case anyone would like to ask any questions or leave a comment, you can use the chat box. Devdip?
Good evening. My name is Devdip Ganguli, and I have been asked to share my thoughts on the impact of Sri Aurobindo's ideas and force in the 21st century on India and the world. Sri Aurobindo dedicated his life to the transformation of humanity. The central focus of his sadhana was to bring down upon earth and make active a plane of consciousness greater than the mental, which he termed the supramental. On 29th February 1956, during a meditation in the ashram playground, the mother would have the concrete experience and vision of the descent of the supramental consciousness into the earth's atmosphere. Surprisingly, few, even in the ashram, were aware of what had taken place. And yet, an event of such enormous significance in the earth's evolution cannot but have significant ramifications at every level of human existence. I draw inspiration from the Mother's New Year message of 1956, which read as follows: "The greatest victories are the least noisy. The manifestation of a new world is not proclaimed by beat of drum." It is my view that the action of the divine force in the world for transformation is subtle, persistent, even if not loud. To truly realize the impact of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, we must seek more calmly, carefully, put our ears to the ground and listen quietly, so to say. To expect earth-shattering changes at the global level within just a few decades is an unrealistic, almost impatient expectation. The work we have in view is so large, its province so wide in scope, that perceptible global shifts will take time before they manifest. Many individual successes will have to join for a collective transformation to occur. Here are two areas in which I perceive enormous but quiet changes taking place. The first is education. Sri Aurobindo wrote more than 100 years ago in The Human Cycle that one of the signs of the coming of a subjective age, a precursor to a full spiritual age, is the development in education that would begin to look upon the child as a complex individual made up of many parts, a being who must be eventually helped to grow towards self-realization. Today, education is being rethought actively. Even in the mainstream, meaningful questions are being asked as to the purpose and aim and true method of education. In India, the National Education Policy 2020 is a step in the right direction, even if we have a long way to go before we can say boldly that the purpose of education is to find one's soul. Around the world, numerous experiments in education are being carried out in the same spirit, and this gives me hope that significant changes are afoot, whose fruits we shall see in the years to come. A second aspect of Sri Aurobindo's work was to break the conventional idea that spirituality and life are necessarily incompatible and opposed to each other. This binary view, which once permeated Indian thought and philosophy, was vehemently challenged by Sri Aurobindo. His yoga and his ashram are founded on the idea that it is not only possible but an evolutionary necessity to bring down the light, joy, perfection, and mastery of the spirit into the various planes and parts of our being, down even to the most physical, and effect a fundamental change of consciousness. Here again, there are unmistakable signs that this wider, integral approach to spirituality is rapidly gaining currency and acceptance around the world, even if the idea is understood partially or incorporated loosely in other spiritual traditions and expressed in different molds and forms and expressions than our own. But the essential truth of a spirituality that must be practiced in life and which must transform life is certainly gaining acceptance among spiritual seekers. I have covered only 2 areas given the time available. Yes, there is no doubt that we have a long way to go, individually and collectively, but I would argue that the despair and dismay we feel about the current condition of the world is in fact a positive sign. For it means that the old ways of being and living are finally failing us as they must, and that we will increasingly have no choice but to change or perish. And if we search carefully, we find the unmistakable signs of a humanity quietly but earnestly seeking inner growth and outer change, authenticity and love, truth and self-identity. And in all this, the action of Sri Aurobindo's ideas and his force is unmistakable.
Thank you, Devdip. I think this really brings it all together and sums it up. In February 2022, SCION was formally launched, and in the last 6 months has grown into a collaborating network of 53 centers and 154 seekers and scholars. SCION has held a series of webinars where centers have shared their work fortnightly. These have been recorded and are available for viewing on the SCION website, integraledu.in. We now present a short update on the work done in the last 6 months. As part of our collective offering for the 150th anniversary, several centers and scholars have got together to create a master program of courses titled All Life is Yoga. Anuradha will take us through the details of this program.
All Life is Yoga is the very first collaborative program of SCION. It comprises of 20 courses and 10 enrichment experiences offered online to a worldwide community. Each student is free to create their own program by combining a few courses and experiences. The program is unique because for the very first time, it brings together a large number of centers and integral yoga faculty, each with their own approach, to unify around the central theme, offering one single program, All Life is Yoga. The coming together of an international faculty endows the program with a wideness of scholarship. The program is unique because each course has emerged from a lived experience of the facilitator. Authenticity is inbuilt. It is unique because it expands the horizons of learning to include reflection and application. Learning is incomplete unless put into practice. Therefore, the evaluation too focuses on reflection, sincere engagement, and creating an actual shift in one's life. It is unique because it ennobles intellectual learning by making self-discovery and growth of consciousness central to the program. The modular structure ensures freedom, flexibility, and self-paced learning. The students can attune the program to their own needs and schedule. The 30 courses and experiences are offered under broad categories. Overcoming challenges of daily life, freedom from anxiety, a crisis of morality versus spirituality, empowering relationships, a healing meditation in their light, and yoga for lower back pain. Enhancing the quality of life, exploring inner colors with yoga art, discovering your inner soul powers, power of imagination, human identity as the doorway to human unity, expressions of bhakti, living Shraddha, know your natural strengths with soul forces, and physical training in integral yoga. Activating deeper and higher powers to live an integral life. Consciousness studies in application to daily life, Om and Savitri reading, hymns to the mystic fire, psychicization through active surrender, and evolving towards integral self-perfection. Creating a revolutionary change in learning, teaching, parenting. Integral education, a practitioner's path, how to use your mind, and integral education for a youth that never ages. Creating professional, social, and organizational change. Foundations in consciousness studies, driving practical change in organizations, and after-school agriculture program. Understanding the integral paradigm, Sri Aurobindo's vision of psychology, our many selves, the Jason's quest, science and spirituality, the end of the curve of reason. Studying Sri Aurobindo's and the Mother's works through a daily blog and through Zoom study groups. True to the spirit of integral yoga and integral education, All Life is Yoga program bridges the gap between material and spiritual pursuit. The program begins on 22nd October and runs for 14 weeks. Sri Aurobindo Integral Education Network invites you to engage in this journey and invite others to join as well. For details and registration, please visit integraledu.in. All life is yoga.
We now come to the final part of the invocation and homage. I invite Tara Didi to say a few words on Sri Aurobindo by the mother. Tara Di will come on live.
Taradi, you need to unmute.
Yeah, I'm ready now. In mother's words, Sri Aurobindo came to tell the world of the beauty of the future that must be realized. He came to give not a hope, but a certitude of the splendor towards which the world moves. The world is not an unfortunate accident. It is a marvel which moves towards its expression. The world needs the certitude of the beauty of the future. And Sri Aurobindo has given that assurance. Sri Aurobindo came to tell us how to find thee and how to serve thee. Grant that in this year of his centenary, we may truly understand what he has taught us and in all sincerity put it into practice.
Thank you, Taradi. And with this, I thought we could end with 1 minute of silent concentration and prayer and love for Sri Aurobindo, and also gratitude for all our centers and all the individuals that have joined together tonight and brought this program together and have created a network, a wonderful network of light globally, something that we can all reach out to, their homes in every part of the world. And Sri Aurobindo's light shines there. And if we can share each other's work and build on that, I think that will give us a lot more strength to walk on the path. May I request 1 minute of silence and then we end. Thank you and good day. Namaskar.